long you guys got one for. Danny White extended everybody in Knoxville. He's throwing them out like candy, dude. It was like Halloween. Coaches were walking up with their bag open, and he was just dropping it like it was hot. They extended 9 people. 9 people. What did you get, Lucas?
I'm going on $2.5 million a year for the next 9 years.
Oh,
And 3 pieces of cheese for the next 3 days. Lucas continues to eat Swiss cheese, which I don't see any cheese, by the way.
I'll go get
As
it.
we start the show, a bet against himself on Twitter essentially cost himself eating a week's worth of packages of Swiss cheese.
No regrets.
yeah.
Blaine, what about you? Extension from Danny White? I can't wait to hear what you got.
Yeah. That's exactly what I did not got. He actually reduced my contracts to 1 year left and you're done. Sorry. See you later. You prove it to us, you can do it again. Yeah, but congratulations to all those guys and girls who all got the extensions. But I'm sure they were overdue on some of them. But man, I still don't understand why Rick Barnes got an extension. I don't understand the coaching industry. I'm gonna just say that as far as contracts, because it makes no sense to me. Yeah, you could put a good recruiting class together, but you're paid for results, not actual recruiting classes. See, so I don't care if you recruit. Guess what? You recruited the best recruiting class last year, and it wasn't better than the year before. See, so I think that's me being the athlete, because I was always based off of my performance is how I get paid. So my mindset is still, to me, anybody in the industry of coaching, player, it's about your performance as a coach. So I thought it was just average at best last year. And you could say it's on the players too. And you recruited players, it's going to be one and done and all that. But end of the day, did y'all finish better than the team before? So, nothing against Barnes. I think he's a real good coach and everything else. I wouldn't have given him an extension. Didn't they just give him an extension last year? I'm out, or the year before. What?
Yeah.
He has a lot. He has like 3 years left. I mean, but what do I know? Hey, he's a solid coach, solid human being. So I'm never gonna, and then Vitalo, I told you I wouldn't go over $1 million.
Well, they went well over $1 million.
Yeah, they did. And he's an exceptional coach, and is kind of taking the program from 0 to, I would give him 9. But as I've always said, and that's why I have to respect Vrabel and what he's doing, it's easier to get to 0 to 9. Now let's maintain 9 all the way through and get some 10s in there. When I'm saying that, I'm just talking about, as a coach, you show consistency. Your team is always in the hunt for the SEC title. You're always in, going to the World Series and those things. That's the harder part in my mind. Now, some people say, oh, no, it's building from ground zero. Yeah, guess what? I was on the team. We went from ground zero. And to get to 8. And then 8-8 was almost the bar. I mean, like, that was where we're at. We could get over the hump. The hardest part was, now let's win 10, 11, 12, 13, and see if we can do it consistently for the next 3 or 4 years. And that was really hard, because there's a lot of, luck involved in that, injuries to, key players. So there's a lot of things that can go wrong there to continue to stay and play at a high level. So, hey, some people will differ, and that's okay too. But hey, I'm never mad at somebody getting paid. Hey, if I was just the athletic director, and actually that was another thing I was actually pursuing in college, I would have a punch list, because I'm not going to let the coaches dictate how I operate, and they make all the money. Now, once your coach gets to a certain level, then it becomes a little bit different. But I just, shoot, Barnes is in his twilight years, man, right? I mean, they're going to be paying him when he's retired. He doesn't have to, jump into his retirement fund and, everything else. So, but hey, more power to him. Hey, new AD, locking down some people that probably should have got locked down beforehand, and keeping Vitello is always a good thing after a heck of a run there the last couple years. So, yeah, hats off to him.
$1.5 million for Vitello. And when we were talking about this, remember, we were trying to speculate what's he going to get. And
I think you 1-2, and I was I said I'm not going past 1-2. I'm around $1 million. They also increased their assistant coaches. I think, I think 400,000 maybe or so compared. So they're going to win. I'm sure there's something else to it, maybe upgrades to facilities and everything else. But hey, man, they had a heck of a run. Ooh, now I think is he the highest paid baseball coach? He makes more. Think about this now. I know his contract was up. Watch this. He makes more than Tim Corbin. Yes, he does.
We looked this up?
Corbin makes 1, 2, or 3, at least as far as his salary. I think it's somewhere around there. And that's why I was saying my number would be. I can't. This guy's he's been I don't know almost a handful of World Series. I can't pay you more than him.
Well, remember when we had this? 1.2. I think there's a story on the Tennessean.
Yeah. That's why I say that.
Earlier this year that said he was the last time, because they're private, so they don't have to give their information away. Mm-hmm. But it was 1.2 with incentives. But what we said that day is whatever it is, it's about to be more. Because as soon as whatever Tony Vitello's number, and we didn't know it's going to be 1.5 million, we were saying like 1.2. Hey, man. Hey, Dr. 3 Degree Lee, we got to have a talk. That talk's already been had. Like his agent has been on hold since this number dropped.
You got to get $2 million. That's like where you start. You know what I'm saying? Serious? I mean, how many World Series has he been to? I don't want to count how many he won. How many has he been to? 5? 4 or 5? Oh man, it's just, hey man. Thanks. I appreciate you, UT Athletics, for getting me a raise.
100%. I'd say, hey, if I was him, I'd send Vitello a fruit basket or something, because he just made him. I mean, what did he make him? $500,000 at least, I would imagine, a year.
Yeah. So, congratulations to all, though. Hey, round of applause. Hey, now they don't have to worry about hiring any coaches. That's for sure. I guess you kept hitting around when we had John Bryce on about that Barnes's contract was up and that it was a new contract already in place. I think they were holding back because they knew they were going to sign multiple coaches to long-term deals, so they could just have one press release, which makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
So that was probably the reason behind it. But we shall see now that you have all your coaches, locked up now. Let's go on a run. Let's go on a run in all the sports. It's kind of contagious once it gets on campus. One does well, the other one got to turn it up. And we all know when football gets turned up, it will be something to see there on UT's campus and all around in their fan base. So hope they do.
And if you're Danny White, all of this is great and good. People are excited about Vitello. Rick Barnes is a guy. He is what he is in the postseason. He's a fantastic human being, though. He's probably a man that most people would say, I'd love to have my child go and play for Rick Barnes and be around him for 4 years. I don't know how many people would not want that. Fantastic dude. But all of this is just window dressing, because if Josh Heupel flops, if that's not a good hire, then that's going to be what gets Danny White thrown out the club eventually. Now, if he does well, he makes it to an extension, but football is the king, man. You got to get football right. This Heupel thing has got to go right.
Well, you know what? I think if Heupel goes wrong, which I think he won't, I think he will go down the right path, buddy. I think Danny White should get a second hire. I don't think it's one and done. Like if it doesn't work with this coach, I mean, yeah, I think he should get a second go round, man. If that's the way you're going now, you hire one guy and it doesn't work out, man.
Well, that's
self-led there, man.
he'll get a second hire. He'll get a second hire. But if this thing goes bad, and if it goes bad quick, then his seat is going to be on fire. Then it's you got to nail the next one, and you got zero grace period. Like the next guy would have to come in and be good immediately. Is where that puts you.
Yeah.
I mean, SEC Media Day is coming up next week, and there's
they got to win 6 games. I mean, they've got some, so they should be able to get to 6 wins, and then after that, bring some excitement with a lot of.
Yeah, 6 wins seems to be the number across the board in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
A lot of people seem to think they're going to hit it this year. So we'll see. And SEC Media Days next week. So, I mean, the unofficial start of football season is here. Heck, there's already a Media Day this week. Big 12 media days underway. So it's officially, unofficially. Yeah, it's officially, unofficially college football season. And we need to officially talk some college football. We'll do that next with Matt Zenitz with On 3. This is a new thing, On 3 Sports. They cover recruiting. You're going to want to hear from him. You're going to want to hear about this new venture. That's all next. It's Blaine and Mickey on 104.5 The Zone on Hump Day, Wednesday.
Titans football, the passion that unites us all. Your home for Titans football and the flagship of Titans radio, 104.5 The Zone.
Matt Zenitz set to join us here in just a minute with the On3 Sports, a new venture covering recruiting. You can go to on3.com and get some more information about them. You can follow them on Twitter at On3 Sports. Blaine, we live in this part of the world where people are as excited about college football recruiting as they are about anything. And I'm not talking about everybody, but there are so many people that are so into recruiting. I can't wait to hear about this new venture with Matt because, man, there are people who are just these super duper college football fans, and they just hinge on every bit of news that comes out about these guys and gals who are going to join their school's various programs.
Oh yeah, no doubt about it. And recruiting is always huge news. And it just cycles over every year because there's high school kids coming in. So there's always going to be new news and updated news and new recruits who are from 5-4 to 0 stars who are actually getting a shot to play at whatever level that is. Naturally, all the hype is around the 5 and 4 stars that go to these major universities, specifically in the South here in the SEC. So yeah, it's always cool just to see how it works out and how it plans out with some of these, big time athletes that come from high school to college. Because sometimes it doesn't always translate it. People forget, who was the 4-star 2 years ago? Well, where did they go? What happened to them? Where are they? And then some of them like, oh yeah, I remember him. So just keeps on chugging. Got to develop and continue to grow as a player, not just on the field but off the field for sure. Now.
The key too is just identifying guys that fit your system. It's just finding the right guys to play in your system. And maybe you don't get a bunch of 5-star guys, but maybe you achieve what you're achieving with 2 and 3, and maybe the occasional 4-star guys. But I'm always impressed by the people who recruit well to guys who fit their system and do what it is that they need them to do. I mean, I know you want to just cram the room full of 5 stars, but maybe you get a different configuration and you get great chemistry. I love seeing guys who can recruit the people who fit their system.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And it's a lot harder for high school kids to kind of predict what they will project to. Some have peaked and some have not, and some will continue to develop, and you project out, hopefully based off of, the metrics of as an athlete and see if they can actually turn into the player you think they can. So it's always a lot tougher than like being a GM in my mind of an NFL team because they are who they are pretty much. And I can continue to develop as an athlete as far as, let's say a wide receiver, can they start running better routes and things of that nature? Yeah, because their talent, they will be able to overcome those things in college. So we shall see. That's why we have Matt Zenitz in, right?
That's right. Matt Zenitz joins us now. Matt, first of all, welcome to the show. And second of all, man, tell us about this new venture On3 Sports. All these recruiting nuts out here need to know so they can start looking you guys up immediately.
Yeah, so new company that's launching, have some great people attached to it in terms of starting this thing, like Shannon Terry, who's been around the college football world for a long time, started Rivals back in the day, it started 24/7, and now starting this new venture that we were looking to develop into a product that leads the way and keeps people up to date, in the loop with everything that they want to know from a college football and recruiting standpoint on a national level. So we officially launch in August and going to be a busy next few weeks just getting everything together for launch, while at the same time just overall trying to stay on top of things from a news and information standpoint on a daily basis leading up to then.
No doubt. There's that never-ending thirst for knowledge. And our guy, Shannon Terry, a lot of people around here know him. Certainly a magic touch. From that guy, whatever he touches seems to turn to gold. So I have no
Midas said that's the great nickname he has. So
yeah, I have no doubt that this new venture will be equally as successful as the others because that's just who that guy is. We were talking about this off the top of the show today. There are media days that have started already. What, Big 12 media days going on now, SEC next week. I mean, I know nobody's got pads on and nobody's reported to their school yet, but Matt, we are unofficially at the official start of college football season once there's media days, right?
Hey, absolutely. I was just talking to some coaches today, and both of those coaches report back to their respective schools, I guess the 26th coming up during the course of these next couple of weeks. So that's when things get cranked up even more heading into fall camp and all.
No doubt. Matt Zenitz joins us. He's at M Zenitz, and you can find out more about his company at On Number 3 Sports.
Well, yeah, that's Shannon Terry's too as well. But Matt, I guess give us a little backdrop of your background before On 3 Sports, and that way our listeners will know who you are and what you've been doing beforehand before you even got involved with On 3 Sports.
Yeah, so I'm originally from Baltimore. I had covered the Baltimore Ravens there 2012 through the early part of the 2014 offseason. Made the transition from there to covering college football, specifically at that point, University of Maryland football to go along with some University of Maryland basketball for the newspaper that I grew up with, the Baltimore Sun. Planned on being there for a while, but was fortunate to have a great opportunity come about the early part of 2015 after that 2014 football season, which we was covering Alabama for AL.com, the Alabama Media Group. So made that move 2015, role eventually progressed to covering SEC football as a whole, and we was very happy in that position, has great relationships at AL.com. But ultimately, we've obviously talked a lot about Shannon already. Things progressed the way they did with On 3, and that was something that, even with me being very happy at AL.com, determined that it was worth leaving there for, and just overall excited about the product that's being built with On 3.
We're on with the new senior national college football reporter, Matt Zenith with On 3 Sports. Now that you've kind of gotten settled in a little bit here with the new company, how does the NLI, affect some of these high school guys? Because, are they asking you questions? They've seen you around doing multiple different jobs, and now you're with On 3 Sports. But, how do you think it impacts the high school guys?
That's a good question. I think it's TBD. I think there are multiple interesting dynamics with the NIL stuff in terms of guys that are already on campus, things from a recruiting standpoint. And then for me, also just interested to see how this continues to progress in terms of the player agent dynamic to go along with that, since we've seen obviously a lot of guys already who have hired representation for help with marketing type stuff. And I think one of the most interesting elements of all of this is just what it means for people in the agent world moving forward, and how this is going to change things in terms of that field, their recruitment when it comes to specific guys. And overall, as frustrating as some of this may be for college football coaches, I think agents, NFL agents, can very much relate to just some of the headaches that can come along with some of this stuff also. And we're starting to see some of that early on also.
No doubt about it. We're on with Matt Zenith with On 3 Sports. I guess that will lead me to, how much do you think the transfer portal and the new NIL, how much is that gonna kind of play into this a little bit too? Will you see more transfers and use that as an enticement, or you think it's probably, the transfer portal is what it is already?
I think one of the things that, and you guys can tell me if you've noticed this also, but to me, I think you've seen some big name guys on a national level get some interesting deals that have some money that come along with it. But I'm not sure what your guys' expectations were going in, but I thought that some players on a national level maybe were going into this with unrealistic expectations, where some guys who maybe weren't quarterback of a top 15 program and maybe just a backup at their respective school were expecting to hit it big and to have big money coming just across the roster as a whole. So that's something that's been interesting the last couple of weeks. Just you've seen some of these big name guys and quarterbacks like De'Ara King, Bryce Young, some guys like that get some deals that have been interesting. But at the same time, I think you've seen kind of limited deals for guys outside of the big names. So one of the things that I think comes along with that is obviously it helps to be at a big name school. I'm sure that's going to be in the recruiting pitch for big programs around the country when it comes to stuff. But at the same time, I think that players as a whole need to temper the expectations a little bit, because I mean, for all these investors, obviously the thing that they're looking for most is to be in a position to get a return on their investment. And if you're not one of those big name guys, I'm just not sure if there's going to be the type of money and deals that some guys, some players were expecting going into this whole thing.
We're on with Matt.
I know that
Zenitz.
went down a path a little bit different than what you were asking, but that was something that came to mind for me. Just it's been a takeaway from the early part of this whole deal.
No, Matt, that was perfect. We're on with Matt Zenitz with On 3 Sports.
So Caden Salter leaves Tennessee for Liberty. No practices. We were saying this. He basically had more run-ins with the law than he did actually on-field practices there. But he winds up in a good spot with Hugh Freeze, who has a quarterback in Malik Willis, who he's groomed basically to the cusp of an NFL career. Now Caden Salter will get that opportunity with Coach Freeze.
Yeah. So definitely an interesting landing spot for him. Just really unfortunate how things played out at Tennessee. Yeah, he was obviously a big name guy within that Tennessee freshman class, and just unfortunately had the issues that he did off the field. But Liberty was a spot that was mentioned right away as a place to keep an eye on, to go along with like Kansas was another one. But ultimately, I think he ended up in a position that if he can keep things together off the field, has a chance to really be successful there under Coach Freeze, and just makes Liberty, which was already a fascinating school and program on a national level based on what Coach Freeze had been doing there, even more interesting to follow track moving forward, even beyond the season. It's just really interesting to look at the quarterback room that they have now. So you have a potential early round 2022 draft pick in Malik Willis, obviously a guy with SEC ties to Auburn, and now after you probably lose him coming out of this season, you have Caden Salter to build around now, who has 4 years of eligibility, obviously has his own SEC ties, and just from a talent standpoint, now looking at the off-the-field stuff, somebody who, with at least some of the scouting services, was ranked as a top 50 overall player nationally.
Matt Zenitz, our guest. So let me ask you this. What school, after all this transfer portal, and I realize it never stops churning, but as of today, this minute, what time is it? 1:31. We can synchronize our watches. What school has benefited the most by this transfer portal activity? What school has been hit the hardest?
Yeah. I mean, Alabama's one that comes to mind as a school that, even though they've lost some guys, have been able to add some very talented players at some positions that were concerns for them heading into the summer. So Henry To'oTo'o is one. I obviously has the track record that he does from Tennessee, and then they were very much in the market for a big play speed guy at receiver, and were able to add that in Jamison Williams, a former top 100 recruit nationally, who may already be the fastest person on Alabama's roster, started for Ohio State last year, even though he didn't put up big numbers or anything like that. Flashed some ability that helped to make him such a highly ranked recruit, had a 45-yard touchdown catch against Clemson in the playoff semifinals, and just in addition for them to go along with Henry To'oTo'o that I know they're happy about. Auburn's another one that comes to mind. That, I mean, they've added, I feel like, close to 10 guys at this point through the portal. So they've lost some too, but they've really upgraded from specifically a defensive standpoint, especially the defensive backfield. So they bring in Drayshon Miller, a corner who was a starter last year at West Virginia for the #1 pass defense in the country, guy who, I'm just talking to some NFL people, has a draftable grade going into the year right now. Donovan Kaufman, who is set to be one of the top players on Vanderbilt's roster going into this year, who looks like a potential starter for them at safety and potentially as a returner, and just gives them some more flexibility in the defensive backfield. And then added another DB by Darius Knighton, who was a top FCS guy. And like I said, overall have added close to double-digit guys as far as transfers, with Marcus Harris from Kansas being another one who is a potential impact guy for them in the front seven. But those are some of the schools that immediately come to mind as winners, to go along with like the Georgias of the world. So anytime you add Darian Kendrick to go along with like Reek Gilbert, obviously that's noteworthy. As far as schools that have been hit the hardest, A&M's one that comes to mind as far as recently. So A&M early on added Jameer Johnson from Tennessee, offensive lineman. But I feel like they've lost, if I remember correctly, 4 guys or somewhere in that range during the course of the last couple months, including a couple receivers, with one being a member of this year's freshman class who was a 4-star kid, Shadrack Banks, who left and ultimately transferred somewhere else in Texas. I think it was TCU. Lost Cam Buckley, who had been a contributor for them in the past, and then one of the more recent ones for them, Elijah Blades, who opted out of last season but was a starter back in 2019, another guy with a draftable grade going into the year. And interesting thing with him, it looks like he may end up staying in the SEC, because the word I continue to get on him is that it may end up at Florida, or will probably end up at Florida.
Good stuff, thorough stuff. Matt Zenitz breaking it down from On 3 Sports here on Blaine and Mickey.
Well, Matt, that was great intel on all that information, but this is going to be the hardest question. Can anybody take down Bama?
Hey, it's going to be an interesting year overall in the SEC. I mean, I obviously have Alabama and Georgia, who are favored going into the year, which is completely understandable. But I mean, talk about A&M. Even though they've lost some guys through the portal recently, A&M has one of the most interesting rosters on a national level heading into this year. The big question is just what they're going to get out of the quarterback position from whoever it is that ultimately replaces Kellen Mond. But outside of the quarterback spot, I mean, like I said, I've talked to people from NFL perspective recently. Like to do that around this time of year just to see who should be on the radar for me. Hey, how guys are perceived in terms of grades heading into the year, and just overall what the perception of them is from the NFL level or at the NFL level. And A&M is absolutely loaded with potential 2022 NFL draft picks and several that are potential early round 2022 NFL draft picks. So if they can get consistent good play from the quarterback position, they could be really dangerous, not only in the SEC, but overall on a national level.
What about Georgia? With JT Daniels now being the starting quarterback and solidifying all of that, do you think they have a shot now at not just winning the East, but maybe to get into the playoffs and do some damage and win a national championship?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So most important thing in terms of your roster, regardless of how deep talented your roster is, you need to win a national title, somebody who's very good, very capable at the quarterback position, and they're in good hands when it comes to JT Daniels, who has a chance to not only be the best or one of the best quarterbacks in the SEC this year, but maybe one of the best quarterbacks on a national level. And that's another roster that is just absolutely loaded. So when I talk about the scouting grades and stuff like that, you have Adam Anderson, who with National Football Scouting has the highest grade among seniors going into the year. Jordan Davis has day 2 type grades right now. You have Lewis Cine at safety, who's a day 2 type guy or top 3 round type guy, and plenty of other guys to go along with that, including, like I said, Darian Kendrick, who have a chance to be 2022 NFL draft picks. So it hurts them, obviously, losing George Pickens at receiver for at least a chunk of the year. But even with him out, they still have some talent at receiver, still have some talent overall offensively, and just on this roster to the point that they're going to be a big threat on a national level and just throughout the year as things work towards the playoffs.
And lastly for me there, Matt, I know a lot of new coaching hires, but who instantly, if they don't start off well, is on the hot seat in the SEC as a coach?
That's a good question. Obviously have some new guys at schools that last year would have been able to identify those coaches as being on the hot seat, but I'm just not sure, outside of like LSU just having a terrible year and Ed Orgeron being on the hot seat, just who would fall in that category. So obviously the Nick Sabans of the world, Kirby Smart, have nothing to worry about, but we will see how the year progresses. I mean, things obviously happen that are crazy every year in college football, and somebody may come to mind when we hang up the phone, but nobody's immediately coming to mind for me that we would fall in that category of being like in the top tier of being in danger heading into the season. Like I said, it may hit me when we hang up the phone, but nobody just right off the top of my head comes to mind.
No doubt. We're on Matt Zenith with On3 Sports.
What SEC incoming freshman do you think has a chance to be the guy that we're all talking about at the end of this year?
I'll throw out one that maybe not a household name. So for me, I always like to try to focus on under the radar guys or guys that aren't talked about a ton. And one that would probably fall in that category, Brock Bowers at Georgia. Tight end who was a 4-star recruit in this year's class for them. Got tremendous feedback on him coming out of the spring, throughout the spring and coming out of the spring. One Georgia person I talked to actually compared him to like a George Kittle type player, having that kind of potential. Flashed throughout the spring, and seems like even with what they have at tight end, that he could find a way to make an impact this year.
All right, last one. Your last tweet before you came on with us. We're in Nashville, Tennessee. Vandy fans always looking for some good news, like any fan base. Some noteworthy recruiting news, literally off of your Twitter right before you came on with us about Vandy.
Yep. So got a commitment from Darren Agu. I think I'm pronouncing the last name correctly, but a kid who was committed to Notre Dame. Notre Dame didn't want to lose him, but ultimately decommitted a couple of days ago. Vanderbilt immediately emerged as potential landing spot, and he made it official today, committing to Vanderbilt, which is a noteworthy pickup for them to be able to essentially steal a recruit that Notre Dame did not want to lose. So a talented kid that, I mean, Javon Hayes specifically helped to lead the way on in terms of landing, but 3-star kid from Georgia, edge defender who represents now a core piece of this first recruiting class for Clark Lee.
Well, Matt, good stuff, man. Appreciate you taking the time to check in with us. People can follow you at Zenitz on Twitter or at On3 Sports or On3.com for all the latest from this new recruiting venture. You and Shannon Terry and the crew, man. Thanks for the time.
Appreciate it, guys.
Thanks a lot, Matt.
Yes, sir. Matt Zenitz. All right. Every year, it seems like, or every so often, like Titans fans are like, just take all edge rushers when you're in the draft. And you always hear fans, if a team is struggling at a specific position, just take all of this one position in the draft. A Major League Baseball team actually did it 20 times. We'll tell you who and what they took next. Blaine and Mickey, 104.5 The Zone. 20.
Setting the bar extremely high with the best Titans coverage. The Buck Rising Show. Tomorrow morning starting at 10 on 104.5 The Zone.
And so people were like, hey, man, at the draft this year, just only take edge rushers. Just pick 7 edge rushers, and maybe 2 of them will work out, right? And people always say stuff like that. Your team can't find a cornerback. Just take all cornerbacks, whatever it is. Well, that's for 7 rounds. And sometimes you don't even have 7 picks. Maybe you have 4 like the Titans did a few years ago. A Major League Baseball team. This is a real thing that happened. I did not even notice this happening during the draft. Of all people, Adam Schefter, who I don't follow, I saw it on his Twitter timeline when I went there to look for whatever in the world is going on with Aaron Rodgers.
Or Richard Sherman.
Well, heaven help us. Richard Sherman, that's a whole nother thing we haven't gotten into yet. The LA Angels had 20 picks this year, and they took 20 pitchers. They drafted only pitchers. They did it. Like somebody actually said, screw it. We don't pitch well. We're only taking pitchers. And if I'm not mistaken, they took 19 college pitchers and 1 high school guy was the number. They only drafted pitchers.
Yeah, Angels, I like it. I love it. I don't know if I would have went that far as 20, but
20.
They like, look, if we got good pitching, we'll be fine. We'll at least be middle of the road at worst case scenario if we can't hit the ball.
20. So the scouting director is a guy named Matt Swanson. He said the team didn't necessarily rule out selecting a position player, especially in the earlier rounds. But at some point during the final 10 rounds on Tuesday, they decided to let it ride with let it ride in quotes. So they're like, screw it, man. Like Thelma and Louise, they just held hands and drove over the cliff with this. The Angels are 12th in the American League and with a 4.90 earned run average. Their starting rotation is even worse. It's 5.06. So when they walk out to start the game, it's like, okay, we got to score 6 runs to win this game. Shohei Ohtani is the first All-Star that they've had who pitched in the All-Star game in years, since one of the Weaver brothers, I guess. But everybody, we talk about this all the time. If the fans were the GM, we only would draft big name players and we'd only draft the glamorous positions. We'd never take some interior defensive linemen or whatever we don't think is sexy. We'd only draft wide receivers, quarterbacks, things like that. Well, they just literally, they did it. They drafted only pitchers in a full major league draft, which apparently some team did it last year, but the draft is only 5 rounds. They took 5 pitchers. The Angels took 20. So this is an unprecedented move to try to get it fixed, Blaine. You can obviously sign some undrafted guys, and you've already got different dudes, in your minor leagues who are second baseman or shortstop or right fielders or whatever. But just for this one go around, they let it ride 20 times in a row. Pitcher, pitcher, pitcher only.
Yeah. I love the move, but it could be, catastrophic if none of them pan out. You might as well just walk out the door and start packing your stuff. You won't know that, probably for 2 or 3 years from now. But man, that's a heck of a move. That kind of leads to when I always talk about the Titans are only drive SEC players. I've said stuff like that. Just drive SEC players. All their fan bases live right here. So at least you're going to pack the stadium if you go wrong with drafting one of them, but you at least think you'll get a solid player if they start in the SEC for any length of time. So yeah, that's kind of down that road. But man, that is fascinating. I'm surprised that's not getting more talk. I retweeted that yesterday, but man, that was kind of like what? Unbelievable that they did it. So yeah.
And let's say they have a rash of injuries at a position. I don't want that to happen, but let's say that they have a couple of shortstops who get hurt, like the guy on the big club, then maybe one of their top guys.
Yeah, just go to the minor leagues.
But maybe you look and they could have, there were a couple of shortstops out of this class that wind up making it or something like that. This is the kind of thing that gets you fired real quick if it doesn't work.
Yeah.
You do something radical like this, and you're either like, that guy's the smartest human who ever lived, or it's like, you ding dong, you are fired.
Yeah, man. Well, I'm going with it's going to work itself out. I think he's going to be all right. It's almost he's got to hit on at least 3 or 4 of those guys at pitching, even if it becomes a reliever at some point. And if they get it right, any of them, and they hit it big, man, watch out. Watch this. He's gonna get an extension.
Well, if he worked at UT, he would have already gotten one. Handing those things out.
He's gonna get an extension, man. And meanwhile, they would have decreased my contract at the same time.
Man, this whole making the major leagues thing is just the guys who make it and the guys who don't. Because there are dudes who are so good in college or they get drafted out of high school and they hit 590 and they hit 23 home runs in a high school season and then they never make it. It's just amazing to me who makes it and who doesn't. Yeah, that's always astounding to me.
And then the guys that do really well in minor leagues. And then now, some guys are skipping, and going from, division. I mean, the second level of minor leagues and just jumping right into the league and doing well. And then some, not so much. So it's an interesting sport, man. It's one you can't call as a guarantee pretty much anything, unless some top 10 pick and something had to happen to you, like injury or something. Yeah.
And I've been trying to explain it to a 6-year-old. We went to a Sounds game. I spent the whole game explaining to him that they work for the Brewers, but they're not Brewers. And then that opened a whole nother. Oh my gosh, this has been quite a journey explaining minor league baseball to a 6-year-old. But I've given it my best shot. But that completely blew his mind.
Oh my, that would have confused me too at 6.
Well, I'm sure I'm doing plenty to confuse that rascal. But he loves baseball and racing, so I'm trying my best to explain both of them to him. We'll see how that goes. Hour number 2, we'll see how that goes because we got that coming up. Ryan Callahan with all the latest. Tennessee got a 4-star receiver out of Memphis. We're going to talk to him about that dude and a whole bunch more. And everybody getting an extension and everything else that's going on the Hill. Ryan Callahan from 247 in about 20 minutes. But some Titans news next. Blaine Mickey, 104.5 The Zone.
The best Titans coverage can be found on your smartphone.
Comeback foiled. Titans 4-2.
Download the 104.5 The Zone app. Your home for Titans football and the flagship of Titans radio. 104.5 The Zone.
every week around this time. We're actually a little bit further than the halfway point of the show. It's 2:03. So, I mean, you're more than halfway through your week right now. You basically have nothing left to worry about. You can just hang out with us today and then 3HL. So, I mean, it's almost the weekend. Let's just celebrate.
Well, they have nothing to worry about because they're listening to us. You know, Lucas, you and me. I mean, there's nothing better that could be getting done. Well, you know, at least based off the ratings, there is nothing else. But yeah. So that's only what I hear now. So it's a pretty good day in that two guys that I know and that I actually played under. Bum Phillips, I did not. So all those people trying to say that, I did not. I'm not that old. I did watch briefly. I think I was like 2, but I did see him. But Floyd Reese and Jeff Fisher getting inducted into the Ring of Honor is pretty unique and pretty awesome that they were the GM and the head coach when I was there, and a lot of great players too as well to help us get over the snide. And really Fisher really navigating with the organization and Mr. Adams, the late Mr. Adams, to move the team and playing in 4 different stadiums in 4 years, which is pretty remarkable. And we still were a pretty solid team, a middle of the road team when everybody makes fun of the 8-8 and 7-9, 9-7 stuff there with Fishbone. But when you think about all that was around that whole move and playing in different stadiums and then finally in 99 getting our home stadium in Nissan Stadium, which was Adelphi at the time, and really feeling like with our new jerseys and our fan base behind us, I think that really was the cog to really get us that surge to go to that Super Bowl that season, because that was really 1 year ahead of the time that we thought where we would be. At least as players, we thought we were close, but we had no idea because of the Freak really developing to that level. And I'm gonna be all honest, and Freak knows this. When we first got there, I was like, dude, he can't play defensive end. I mean, he was getting drilled. And I mean, we were like, dude, you're in the back, you're a linebacker, but you're in the way. Oh. Then especially when they would double down on him, and to his credit, he was mostly a linebacker. He would rush the passer at times there at Florida. So, but once he finally figured it out that last week, right before the first regular season game, it was uncanny. It was a shock, like, to all of us that he went out there and did what he did.
Broke the record.
Yeah. I mean, we knew he was fast. He was athletic. We know those all over. But when you put your hand in the dirt and you go against mano a mano against one of those 300 pounders that you're not used to going against, and they quick, he was like, hey, man, this is kind of foreign territory. So I got to give credit to Washburn as well as Greg Williams just staying on him in his ear, almost deafening. I mean, almost like, dang, man, this dude's going to quit the way you verbally abusing and chastising him in the meeting rooms, on the field. It was like, dang, I am thankful he did that, because woo, I don't know if we would have got there as soon. And as soon as we lined up in that stadium against the Bengals, it was like, whoop, that all went away, and he was a different dude. And that really, and the fan base and everything else, and then the freak out. And I mean, I felt like I was out there dancing, doing the freak song and everything else, man. So that really catapulted us, to the promised land. So, man, those guys get all the credit. Floyd Reese and Jeff Fisher leading the helm and all the coaching staff and the players eventually getting it done. So, man, that's pretty exciting to see that those guys are being honored in that fashion. And Bum Phillips too, which, you go look at his record. He was 59-38 as a head coach. You go, well, dang, why wasn't he already in the Ring of Honor? So that's past due time for him. So yeah, it's exciting times for all those coaches and their families and everybody involved with all those achievements that they've achieved over the time in their career as coaches and GM.
Yeah, Jeff Fisher, 147 wins. This is all in the press release about 147 wins with the Titans, 142 in the regular season. He had 5 wins in the postseason from 94 to 2010. Bum Phillips was the defensive coordinator in 1974. Then he was the head coach for 6 seasons from 1975 to 80. But here was the thing about the Oilers, and I was always kind of an Oilers fan. I was in Arkansas, and I felt like pretty close by in Texas.
You just love the jerseys, don't you?
Oh, no, I love the jerseys. But like Earl Campbell and Dan Pastorini and my man, Billy White shoes. But the Oilers fired their coach like every 2 years. literally, like Bud Adams was notorious for firing the coach. So there was Lou Remkus. He lasted into the second year. Then Wally Lim was the coach for a year. Then Pop Ivy was the coach for 2 years. Then Sammy Ball for 1 year. Then Hugh Taylor for a year. Then Wally Lim again for 4 years. Then a guy named Ed Hughes for 1 year. So it was like a revolving door. They were firing the coach like every other year or so.
Oh, I had no idea. I didn't know any of that history. I barely remember Bum Phillips. I think I only remember because he used to wear his hat on the sideline.
He wore his hat.
I think I was like 4 or something like that. Maybe.
They were, yeah, I'll admit, I'm a little bit older. Man, those teams were so much fun. And he was so far ahead of his time. Like I remember seeing interviews. This was before there was ESPN or anything. So yes, this goes way, way, way back. But I can remember seeing interviews with like Oilers players. And there was one night of the week where everybody got to bring their family to wherever the headquarters was in Houston, to the practice facility, whatever it was. And they had beer and pizza, and their kids got to run around on the field. But Bum Phillips did stuff like that. He was a big family guy, big players coach. So I was always a big fan of Bum Phillips. He later went to New Orleans and coached there for a while. Even brought Earl Campbell there at the very end of his career. And poor Earl was just so beat up at that point. He just wasn't the same guy. It was hard to watch. But he loved Earl, and you could tell. And Bum Phillips is one of those guys. He had great quotes. Like Earl Campbell reported one year, and they had a mile conditioning run for their test, and he failed the test. So some reporter asked him, "So what are you going to do about it?" He said, "Well, if it's first in a mile, we won't give it to him." That was it. That's literally what he said. Like, okay, well, if it's first in a mile, then we'll give it to somebody else. But people in Houston are big mad about this, Blaine. Like mad.
People in Houston are mad.
Yes, they're mad about Bum Phillips being honored by the Titans. They're mad.
Well, who else could he be honored by? He can't get honored by the Texans.
Amen. It's like the Adams family hasn't owned the team for, 71 years this year. It'll be their 71st season.
It's the same discussion as the uniforms. The same discussion as the Oilers uniforms and helmets.
I mean, the last time I checked, I've got 2 really good friends, and one that I'm talking to now, Kevin Dyson and Blaine Bishop, that were Tennessee Oilers. And so was Joey Kent, who you hear on the station with their great podcast. And so were a whole bunch of guys, Bruce Matthews and Steve McNair and Eddie George. But oh my gosh, they're pissed. They think that the Adams family should just surrender everything that has to do with Houston and give it back to the city. What are you going to do? Just drive it in the middle of town in a box and leave it there? Well, because it's not the Texans' history.
Yeah, that's